Hi, I'm Emerald,
I'm Henry.
and this is...
The Spotlight.
Today, we are reviewing Snake Eyes. It is the single greatest movie ever made. It pushes boundaries that we didn't even know existed. It's got motorcycles and glowing mechanical gems and sword fights, a lot of sword fights. Everyone uses swords in this thing, even though guns are very much a real thing. And when they do use guns, they're set to stormtrooper range. The bad Snake Eyes also make an appearance. And there's even some big snakes. Okay, review over. Oh yeah, and we also saw the Green Knight.
In our Cruella video, we complain about Disney and their whole obsession with only making sequels and spin-offs, a trap that many studios fall into in the modern film scene. After Cruella, and with Jungle Cruise on the way, I needed something to cleanse my movie palette. But when we ask for new and innovative ideas, we tend to forget that there's already a studio that has been doing this for years. A24. I mean, guys, look at that catalog. When it comes to studios that have the balls to greenlight or produce innovative and exciting projects, A24 has that shit on lock. And before you say, oh, Emerald, Disney's a worldwide entertainment company, and A24 is only an independent entertainment company. To that I say, fuck off, I don't care.
Anyways, The Green Knight is A24's latest movie, directed and written by David Lowery, based on late 14th century work of English literature. Is it worth the watch? Absolutely. It's not only stunningly gorgeous in every single scene, but also incredibly open-ended to interpretation and extremely well written. This is perhaps my favorite movie of the year and deserves as much praise as it's getting.
However, before you watch, keep in mind, this is not your average fantasy story. It's not a tragic tale of a knight going on a straightforward quest for honor, showing bravery and courage, as well as sword-fighting talent on the way. There's no big CGI baddie and fight scene to match, no huge clash of armies. It's a very slow burn, character-focused story with literally no action set pieces. It gets very weird, hard to understand, and open-ended with a lot of scenes. It's beautiful, and watching it feels like a dream, but remember, this is not a basic fantasy movie for Lord of the Rings fans.
There's some truly beautiful cinematography in this movie. The framing is fantastic, especially in wide shots, and there's so many cool shot compositions that you'll remember for a while after the movie ends. The camera work is fantastic, and Lowery opts for a long take as much as possible in most scenes. You'll notice it especially once the pacing slows down. Even when there are cuts, the cameraman lingers for an extra few seconds at every angle. It really gives a lot of time for the movie to breathe. It even includes shots that could probably be cut in order to take a full minute off the runtime each, because they only add to the lushness of the movie.
The sound design is another fantastic part of this movie. Each scene has little sounds that make the world feel more alive and lush, and it's one of the few movies that I actually noticed and appreciated the small parts of the sound on my first viewing. This complements the beautiful choral score, which gives the movie a dreamlike feel. The lighting and color palette are also stunning. Most of the film is shot with the green tint, as it is the Green Knight, and returning to green is a major theme of the film. Also, there's some beautifully contrasted sections that use deep shade of yellows, as well as a desaturated gray at one point. In a mostly plotless movie, the colors help give shape to the movie and keep the viewer engaged in what's happening on screen.
The world building is also stunning. The world that Garwin inhabits is gorgeous and mysterious, and it's just fun to watch someone live in this fantasy world. Truly great world building with a mix of fantasy and realism by Lowery. So this movie is tragic and memorable, beautifully shot with a fantastic message. As far as an adaptation of an original text, it stands up great. This is just an extremely well-made movie. And while it probably won't go appreciated by general audiences, this is a good movie for fans of A24 and art house films. And that's all for the non-spoiler section. This movie is definitely worth the watch. Perhaps the best movie of the year so far. It's an intellectual film, for lack of a better word, and therefore will bore some people. However, if you watch a lot of movies, it's hard not to like this one. Skip to this timestamp to see our out of 10 rating. We'll see you there.
God damn, this movie is good. There's a type of uncertainty when it comes to plot events that make this movie super fun to watch and think about. There's a bunch of parts where the timeline and plot events don't properly line up, giving the movie its dreamlike feel. What happened with the kid that stole Gawain? Fuck, how do you pronounce that? Whatever. The kid that stole Gawain's stuff? Who's that lady at the castle? How did he get the axe back? The fuck is up with that fox? Is the Green Knight the lord of the castle or not? We're gonna do a plot explanation, but before that, check out the spark notes for the original story that this movie is based on. It doesn't perfectly line up with the movie, but it provides some much needed context. Alright, here's a lightning round of explanation for all the confusing parts of the movie. The opening shot of Gawain on fire represents the fact that he's not a great person yet, and a king, he would just ruin the kingdom. Hence, him burning, like his kingdom would.
We then cut to Garwin waking up in a brothel, which is altogether a very unchivalrous thing to do. Our first indication that Garwin is not the best knight yet.
Fast forward to the Christmas dinner. Gawain tells Arthur that he has no story to tell because he still has no quest completed, setting up his need to prove himself later. Then the Green Knight shows up.
Oh yeah, the king and queen are Arthur and Guinevere, the wizard guy who Arthur takes advice from is Merlin, and Garwin's mom is Morgan Le Fay, if you didn't get that yet.
You might be asking, why is Morgana summoning the Green Knight? She's Gawain's mom. There's a few interpretations, but the dominant reading is that she's creating him to turn Gawain into a good leader when he takes the throne.
Then Garwin beheads the dude. You might be wondering why Arthur even had someone take this challenge at all, much less decapitate him. Because Garwin could just scratch his cheek and then they wouldn't need to cut his head off. Yada yada yada. They accept the challenge because that's what knights do. Chivalrously accept challenges.
And Gawain cuts off the head of the knight instead of just a scratch because he wanted to show how brave he was. However, he actually just failed his first test. Let me explain. Through Gawain's journey as a knight, he faces a series of challenges. Each challenge is supposed to show a virtue of knighthood, of which there are 5, or 6 if you think about it too hard. Friendship, generosity, chastity, courtesy, and piety, plus honor, technically.
By striking down an unarmed enemy, Garwin shows a lack of courtesy and courage despite being cheered on by his people. He has failed the first test. After he sets off on his journey, he fails his first official test, to show generosity. He refuses to give any kind of condolences or help to the boy who gives him directions, and has to be literally begged for any kind of payment. And so, the kids rob him, having failed his first test.
The slow pan around to him dead on the ground, although a bit pretentious, is the first of many alternate endings of this story. What would have happened if Gawain had not taken the courage to go on? The kids essentially leave the story at this point, which I like to believe is a reference to the fact that they might not be real, just illusions perhaps summoned by Morgana to challenge Gawain. Winifred, too, is probably just another figment of the imagination, the enchantment maybe, or maybe just Gawain's own mind.
Garwin moves on to his next challenge, courtesy. He sleeps in Winifred's bed, and when she asks him to retrieve her head, he asks what he'll receive in return. Another test failed. He learns the Pillar of Courtesy, he gets the axe back, which is another indicator that maybe the kids weren't real, and he never lost it to begin with.
The challenge of friendship lies with the fox, where at first he throws rocks, but eventually becomes the fox's friend. However, he also fails this test by sending the fox away towards the end of the movie. We should also mention that the giants that he meets may not be real, but him asking for help across the valley would be another test that he failed, had the fox not helped him avoid it.
Chastity, he fails by falling prey to the woman at the castle. He lets her seduce him, and the lady being played by Essel, his lover from the beginning, is likely another indicator that nothing is real. Also, the old lady with the blindfold is likely Morgana again, watching her son. This is because of when she caresses him, the fact that the green belt was given to Garwin at the beginning as well as in the castle, and that Morgana was in the castle in the original text.
Backtracking to the beginning, piety is a test that he failed many times, due to him being essentially a knight for fun, and not doing it for the king, or for God. He fails this test many times in the beginning, and once at the end when he chooses to run away in the alternate timeline. The alternate timeline running away thing is one of the clearer parts of this confusing section. It's showing what happens to him if he doesn't grow as a knight and as a person and show his honor, what the 5 pillars represent.
There's a few ways to interpret the ending, but I think the best one is that Garwin doesn't actually die. In the original, the Green Knight is the lord of the castle, which is why they both talk about games in the movie, and he only nicks Garwin. Additionally, Morgana wouldn't want Garwin to die, and she summoned the knight, so it's likely that the knight spares Garwin after he shows the ultimate show of bravery, tossing the magic belt aside. Plus, the last line is said in a juvenile manner, as if the Green Knight is making an inside joke. Assuming this ending is true, Garwin goes home a changed man and turns into a good king.
So yeah, the plot is cool. Chew on that. The review is running pretty long, so let's wrap it up real quick with some other things that we like. Sound design and score are standout elements. Right at the beginning of the movie, we see water dripping down from the ceiling and hitting the ground in time with the beat, Edgar Wright style. It's a small detail, but it demonstrates the amount of care that was put into giving this movie its unique style and feel. There's also so many incredibly cool sounding parts, especially when the movie gets weird. The sound design is terrifying during Gawain's shroom trip, and the sounds when he sees a giant in the valley is incredibly cool. The soft pitter-patter of the fox's footsteps are adorable. It's one of my favorite little details. The creaking sounds of the Green Knight as he moves are also great, and it just shows the amount of care that was put into this movie.
The score is fantastic. The choral voices provide an ethereal, yes, I'll say it again, a dreamlike sound to the movie. At times, the music is beautiful, providing lushness to an already beautifully designed world. In quiet moments where the camera isn't showing anything, whether it's just showing establishing shots for longer than you think, or it's trained on something that isn't even relevant to the plot, the score provides the entertainment that keeps you engaged with the film. When bad things happen and tension builds, the score finds a way to also make you tense. Close dissonance in the soprano end of the vocal range put your teeth on edge. Daniel Hart truly outdid himself.
We mentioned it before, but the world building is great. You just want to live in this gorgeous world, which is real enough to suspend your disbelief, while being fantastical enough to want you to be there. It starts off with simple medieval kingdoms, but as Gawain starts his quest and starts to acknowledge that magic exists without any surprise, you're slowly drawn into the world that Lowery creates. Some elements like the unsureness of who or what Winifred is, or what the fox is, just make you more interested in what's happening. The cool scene with the giants, the gorgeous yellow area by the green chapel, all just weird and magical enough to make you want to be there, but keep you grounded in reality. I would honestly watch a 5-hour cut of this movie at some time just to experience more of the world that it's set in.
And of course, the ending. This may be one of the best movie endings since The Sound of Metal. It's inspired, the dream sequence is great, and it finally shows you the message that the movie has been secretly showing you the entire time. A message about honor. It completes a character arc that we thought Garwin would never complete, and that last line is just perfect. It leaves the ending up to interpretation on what happened, although I have my suspicions, and it also satisfyingly wraps up the movie. Garwin has completed his arc. We don't even need to wonder what happens when Garwin gets home, because they already showed us, in a way. Garwin's dream sequence, where he removes Essel from his life, loses his son, and leads his kingdom to ruin, is what happens if he runs away. But by accepting his fate, even if he does live, we know he'll go back and do essentially the exact opposite of what we saw, in order to be a good leader. It's amazing how this ending manages to show us an alternate ending, wrap up the movie with an open ending, and infer what happens after the credits roll, if he survives. Genius.
This movie isn't perfect, though. There's a few things that could be better. For one, as great as a vague story is, this movie is hard to understand after reading the original text and watching numerous YouTube explanations. Sometimes the movie is trying to be a puzzle for you to solve. Take Tenet, which is impossible to understand on your first few viewings, but the fun of the movie is unlocked by taking the time to rewatch and understand it. But I don't think that The Green Knight is trying to do that. It treats itself as a puzzle for sure, trying to make the audience think and understand what's happening on screen. But I think it goes a little too far. It's trying to be a smaller puzzle than it actually is. A smaller puzzle than Tenet for sure, which we can tell by the fact that the plot kind of makes sense without research. However, full understanding of the movie requires almost as much research as Tenet. I rarely say this, but I wish the movie kind of spelled out some more parts more obviously to the audience.
The Green Knight is really good at letting itself breathe. It spends a lot of time just doing nothing. Remember those 2 scenes of Garwin waiting for the night to wake and nothing happens? You wouldn't know if those scenes were cut, but by virtue of keeping them in, the movie controls its pacing and makes sure nothing goes too fast and no symbolism is passed over. However, one problem actually stems from that. At times, a scene can drag on longer than it needs to. For instance, in the slow pan around to show Garwin dead after the first test, we could speed that up a bit. It doesn't need to be as long as it is, and yes, it's cool and thought-provoking, but it also drags the pacing down further than it needs to. It can be slow-paced and not spend 3 minutes on a single shot that could be told in 50 seconds. But honestly, that's essentially all the problems with this movie. The Green Knight is an excellent film. While it could shorten the runtime in some places, it's also a very good movie that's definitely worth the watch.
And that was our review for David Lowery's Green Knight. It's an outstanding movie that merits a few rewatches and many hours of thinking. Before we reveal our out of 10 rating, here's a quick recap of how we grade things here in the spot. The movie is scored out of 10 with decimals. 5 is average, 10 near perfect, and 1 is terrible. 6 to 7 is good, but better than average. 8 to 9 is for incredible, life-affecting movies. 3 to 4 is for something forgettable. 1 to 2 for a terrible movie. And 0 is for Artemis Fowl. And with that, our final score for The Green Knight is 8.4. Best movie so far this year. Thanks for watching. Check out The Green Knight and let us know what you think. I've been Emerald.
Henry.
And this has been